The drums called the village together. Laughter danced through the air like the scent of roasted yam. Even the elders, whose bones ached from memory, stood tall beneath the rising sun. He was the trader with wealth in his hands and pride in his voice. She was the girl from the edge of the village, quiet as a shadow, chosen by the council for her beauty and her silence. Palms waved. The bride was wrapped in beads too heavy for her shoulders. The groom beamed. She smiled softly, like a leaf trying not to tremble. The dancers spun. The ancestors were thanked. Elders spoke blessings with wine-stained lips. When the sun dipped low, the people went home full. The hut behind the compound closed its door. That night, the wind held back its breath. A cry slipped through the cracks, sharp, then smothered. No one moved. No one asked. The rooster slept through it all. Morning broke, but not softly. She came out with a jug, her eyes low. The wrapper on her arm slid, revealing skin too purple for the morning light. Women paused, then continued pounding yam. She walked slowly, like her bones were learning to obey again. She poured water without splashing. She stirred the firewood without a word. Children laughed nearby, chasing a chicken. One ran past her and stopped, staring. She smiled again, this time with her lips only. At the well, two women whispered behind calabashes. One coughed loud enough to chase the silence. By the mango tree, the old woman with a bad hip leaned on her stick and said what others swallowed. A happy wedding doesn't always mean a happy bed. No one replied. No one disagreed. They watched the bride carry firewood with careful hands. They watched the trader walk by with his chest wide and steps loud. The wind moved through the leaves again, but the village remained still. The marriage had begun, and the village had already chosen to forget what it heard. But silence remembers longer than noise. She rose early, swept the compound, and boiled water before the rooster crowed. She knelt to serve his food. He barely looked at her. When he did, it was only to correct, to mock, to command. He spoke loud so neighbors could hear. Called her slow. Called her empty. The words stuck like palm thorns, but she bowed her head and said nothing. At the market, he walked ahead. She followed. He threw her wrapper to the dust once. Laughter rose from the palm wine stall. No one stopped him. No one helped her. She picked it up and tied it again. One day, the girl next door asked what the elders feared to say. "Do you ever cry?" The answer came soft. "I save my tears for the night." At the next gathering, elders spoke of obedience. One rubbed his knee and said, "A wife must endure. Like yam in fire, she becomes sweet when burned." Women nodded. Men nodded louder. His mother placed roasted groundnuts in her hand and smiled wide. "You are strong like calabash," she said. "The calabash breaks only when empty." But her eyes no longer danced with the firelight. They dimmed, day by day, until even the wind stopped trying to lift her spirit. She scrubbed his clothes while he shouted about salt. She brought his slippers while he told guests, "My goat walks straighter than she does." Neighbors shook their heads in silence, then turned back to their chores. She smiled again the next morning, the same smile, but her feet dragged slightly. Her fingers trembled when holding the cup. She poured water for him and stared straight through it. The girl who smiled in pain had not stopped smiling, but her spirit had gone somewhere deeper, somewhere that silence builds its weapons. And one day, it would return. The village gathered to settle the land matter. Elders sat in a wide circle. Farmers shouted over boundaries. A solution rose quietly from the mouth they least expected. She spoke calm, measured, and clear. Her words made sense. Heads turned, but pride listens only to its own voice. He rose, shaking with heat. He shouted about men's rights and women's silence. She did not blink. Then came the slap. It cracked through the air like thunder before the rain. A gasp swept the gathering. Some covered their mouths. Others looked to the elders. But the chief only cleared his throat and stared at his staff. She stood still. Her cheek burned, but her eyes stayed low. She did not speak. She did not fight. She walked away with steps slow and even, like she was counting the earth beneath her feet. That night, she cooked as always. Pounded yam. Stirred stew. But something slipped into the pot. A drop of blood. It rolled from her arm, unseen by the one who waited to eat. The scent of pepper soup filled the room. He reached for the bowl with loud hunger. She watched him eat. Outside, the moon rose. The wind blew soft, carrying a whisper to the neighbor's hut. That one sat near her mat and whispered through the curtain. "That girl," she said, "carries storms in silence." No one answered, but the leaves rustled louder than before, and the flame under the pot refused to die quickly. The path twisted through silence. Not even the birds dared speak. She walked with bare feet and steady breath. Each step cracked old leaves that remembered pain. The Irako tree stood tall, ancient, unmoved. It had watched births, deaths, lies, and justice refused. She knelt and poured palm oil at its roots. She scattered goat hair into the wind. She placed her blood-stained wrapper across the roots like an offering. Her hands did not tremble. Her voice came low. "Let my pain return to its owner." The wind froze. The tree did not answer, but the crow did. It landed on the highest branch and screamed once. Sharp, final, like a gavel at the end of judgment. She looked up. The sky shifted gray. Then came the shuffling of feet. Light but sure. The sound of someone who walks without fear or need. A blind man passed across the path. His cane traced slow circles in the dust. His eyes saw nothing, but his spirit saw everything. He stopped. "You have spoken," he said. "The earth listens." Then he was gone. No farewell. No second glance. The tree held her silence. The crow flew away. The wrapper soaked deeper into the soil, and the wind carried her whisper across the village. But only the spirits heard it clearly. She ran without looking back. Branches tore at her wrapper. Thorns kissed her feet. The forest swallowed her. But she did not slow. The moon followed her. The trees stepped aside. She did not stop until the ground turned soft, and the air tasted like memory. The river waited. It shimmered in the dark, wide and silent. The same river where her grandmother once bathed before birthing her father. The same river where women whispered their secrets to the water. She dropped to her knees. Her hands dug into the wet soil. Her voice cracked into a cry. She wept until her breath broke. The water stirred. The current shifted backward, against its own will. Mist rose. A figure stepped forward. Eyes glowed like burning coal. Skin shimmered like rain on stone. The spirit of the water stood before her. "You cannot return yet." The voice did not echo, but it stayed. She reached out with cracked fingers. She drank, not because she was thirsty, but because the water asked her to. Her body slumped forward. Her face kissed the mud. She did not speak again. The river held her gently. It did not drag her under. It did not carry her home. It simply cradled her like a mother rocking a broken child. When her eyes opened again, there were strange voices. New hands. A hut she did not know. A place she had not seen. But the river had brought her here. And the river does not carry what it cannot change. The widow found her near the river, wrapped in silence. She said nothing. She asked nothing. She simply brought herbs and warm food. Days passed in soft lessons. Crush this leaf. Stir that bark. Watch the boil rise before adding ash. The old hands moved slowly, but they never shook. She watched. She copied. She failed. She tried again. Soon her fingers remembered faster than her thoughts. She ground seeds until they smelled like memory. She poured oil with balance. She learned which pain came from bone, and which came from grief. They came to her, old men with swollen legs, boys with broken arms, women with eyes that held too much. She did not talk much, but her hands spoke. One morning, a girl came in silent sobs. Her cheek was blackened. Her steps were crooked. She would not sit. She would not speak. But when the mixture was ready, it was not given in a bowl. It was pressed into the bruises by careful fingers. Pressed slow, pressed deep, like a blessing pulled from the earth. And when the girl tried to leave, the hands did not let go. They held longer than necessary. Not for healing, but for witness. The whispers began soon after. She was called Eneni Miri, Mother of Water, the one who had drowned but did not die, the one who healed pain she had once swallowed. That night, the fire burned low. She stared into the red heart of it, and her voice returned. One sentence only. I will not run again. The wind rustled the herbs hanging from the roof. The flame did not blink. They came walking, 3 men with dust on their ankles and urgency in their eyes. They did not ask for herbs. They brought no wounds, only a scroll sealed in red wax. Word had traveled like fire on dry leaves. A healer lived where pain used to live, a woman whose silence healed deeper than roots. They had heard the stories, how her hands pulled sorrow from bone, how her gaze forced truth from liars. The scroll unrolled slowly. The village of her birth had lost its judge. The old one died with foam on his lips, cursed by snakebite no one saw coming. The elders argued, the people fought, and the land grew confused. Then the chief priest had a dream. He stood in a field of flame. A girl stepped through the fire, eyes like rushing water. She said nothing. She only raised her palm, and the flame turned to light. When he awoke, he said only one sentence. Call the girl who carries river water in her eyes. The widow healer listened to the message. She stirred her pot slower that day. She wrapped herbs tighter. She placed a carved bone on the table. A river that flows back must face the rocks, she warned. The girl did not flinch. She packed no bag. She asked for no escort. She simply nodded once. The fire in her eyes did not blink. She walked into the morning light barefoot. The villagers stood along the path, unsure whether to bow or bless. A few touched their hearts. A few looked away. The river had returned. But this time, it did not come to wash away. It came to judge, and the dust remembered her footsteps. She returned in a blue wrapper, dust rising behind every step. Her head stayed high. Her back stayed straight. Her silence walked ahead of her. Children stared, but did not call her name. They saw a woman they had never known. The girl who once fetched firewood barefoot had vanished. What stood now looked carved from stone. Elders muttered behind their hands. Some turned away. Others nodded slow, like remembering a forgotten proverb. Then the laughter came. Loud, sharp, mocking. So the broom returns to sweep dirt? The one who spoke smiled wide, but the smile did not reach his eyes. She said nothing. She passed him like wind through dry leaves. She reached the council fire and sat without being invited. The chief rose, voice steady but cautious. He held the scroll with both hands, like it burned at the edges. The spirits have declared. This woman will serve as village judge. The air shifted. Eyes widened. A hawk flew overhead and circled once. Murmurs filled the space where drums once beat. Someone spat. It hit the sand between them. We'll see. But the wind carried that defiance away, and the flame at the center of the council fire rose just a little higher. They brought their quarrels to her hut. Land disputes, goat theft, palm wine spilled in anger. She listened with hands still and eyes sharp. Her voice stayed calm, but her gaze made liars choke. She spoke in proverbs the village had forgotten. The river does not shout, yet it moves the strongest tree. A farmer complained about his brother stealing chickens. She asked one question. The brother ran before she finished speaking. A widow wept over palm fruit stolen in the night. She said nothing at first, then spoke one line. When justice walks barefoot, it leaves fire behind. The people began to fear her fairness, not for its cruelty, but its truth. One day, a man came with a basket full of yams, fresh, fat, buried beneath a white cloth. She uncovered it, looked once. The fire pit nearby roared higher than usual. She dropped the yams into the flame without a word. The crowd gasped. No one moved. Another day, a woman smiled too wide. Her praise came sweet and oily. She called her mother of wisdom, queen of hearts. She didn't blink. Your tongue is soft, she said, but your heart leaks poison. The words hung in the air like smoke too heavy to rise. The villagers whispered among themselves. This was not the girl who once cried behind the clay hut. This was not the bride who walked with bruises under moonlight. She had returned with river water in her eyes. And now, even the boldest voices fell quiet in her presence, because truth listens like fire, and fire burns with silence. The morning air carried something heavy. A case came forward, simple on the outside, rotten underneath. A man had beaten his wife. On their wedding night, gasps floated like dust behind the council hut. Whispers ran faster than goats. Then the name dropped. Obi, the one who once walked through the village with a chest full of pride and a mouth full of fire. He stood tall now, not with shame, but with boldness. The girl beside him, his cousin's daughter, wore bruises shaped like secrets. Her wrapper hung loose. Her head hung lower. She said nothing. He did not wait to be asked. She disrespected me. He said it with no fear, no tremble, no guilt, like he was swatting a fly. The villagers looked to the woman on the stool. She stared at him, eye steady, hand still. Then came the words. Tell me exactly how. The wind stopped. The drums outside the compound stopped. Obi laughed, but his laugh cracked. He repeated his claim. She disrespected me. No one moved. Not the elders. Not the women. Not the girl who cried without sound. The judge did not speak again. But her silence was not empty. It was the same silence that once bled behind a locked door. The same silence that once stirred stew with trembling fingers. Now, it was sharpened. Now, it was watching. And Obi did not realize. He had not brought a case. He had reopened a wound. And the wound was ready to speak. She rose from the stool without a word. In her hand was the judgment stick, old carved feared, passed down from voices older than memory. A piece of wood that once judged thieves, liars, and men who thought themselves gods. She held it to her chest. The air shifted, the wind circled, and then went still. Then she pointed, straight at him. Do you deny your hand struck her? The crowd leaned forward. The leaves stopped moving. He scoffed. I am a man. That sentence held centuries. It dripped with the pride of those who never faced fire. The stick began to glow. First dull, then bright, red like the embers under a cooking pot. Alive, hungry. Gasps rose from the villagers. A child dropped a bowl. An elder whispered a prayer. The light wrapped around the stick like flame trying to climb a tree. Still, she did not move. Still, she did not blink. Then the spirits shall speak. The judgment had begun, and the stick was listening. His mouth opened to laugh. Mockery waited behind his teeth. But before the sound escaped, the judgment stick exploded. Fire shot from its tip. Bright, wild, furious. The flames spiraled up like a snake struck by lightning. The sky dimmed. The wind dropped to its knees. Then came the voice. Not hers, not his. Older, deeper, rooted in stone and ash. You hurt the river. You broke the bone. You must kneel. His legs gave way. His chest hit the earth. His pride shattered like a pot dropped from the roof. He begged, not with words, but with the way his hands clawed at dust. The fire did not blink. She stood firm. The stick pulsed in her grip. Heat danced around her feet. Her voice returned. Let the fire judge. No one moved. No one dared. The elders lowered their eyes. The women crossed their arms. Even the birds fell silent. The spirits had spoken, and their judgment was final. He was banished before the sun returned, and not a single drum followed him. Drums rose before the sun. Women danced outside her hut, feet stamping thanks into the earth. Beads rattled. Voices soared. Praise names filled the wind. Men carried stones to the river. They stacked them with care, mixing ash with mud. A shrine rose beside the water, not for the gods of thunder, but for the one who carried silence like a blade. The chief arrived without his guards. He took off his hat. His knees bent low, not for formality, but for fear wrapped in respect. She nodded once. She said nothing. The village that once watched her bleed now watched her walk. She moved slowly, barefoot across the dust. The same dust that once held her pain now held her power. Children did not chase goats near her path. Fishermen paused when her shadow passed the river. No one dared meet her gaze. The girl who once wept behind cooking pots now wore the weight of justice. And the people could feel it. They whispered her name behind hands. They called her flame. They called her river. They called her thunder without sound. Mothers held their daughters close at night and said the same thing. If your heart is true, she will protect you. But if not, they left the warning unfinished. The shrine by the river never dried. The fire near her hut never died. And the village that once chose silence now chose fear and respect in the same breath. They came from places beyond the river bend. Traders, widows, chiefs with 6 sons, wives with questions no herbs could answer. They knelt before the shrine. They waited near the hut. They left kola nuts, carved stools, calabashes of oil, not to demand, but to thank. At the base of the irako tree, the gifts piled high, cloth from distant lands, tokens from those who heard her name carried in the rain. The tree had witnessed her pain. Now it witnessed her power. A blind man sat beside it, hands tapping rhythm on a carved drum. His voice floated through the branches. She came crying. Now she makes others weep for good. His chant became song. His song became truth. Children repeated it like a proverb. Birds echoed her name across the sky. The sound curled through the forest like smoke from sacred fire. She heard it each time she fetched water. Heard it in footsteps behind her. Heard it in silence. But still she walked alone. She slept close to the river. The same river that once chose her. The same one that had not let her drown. Now, her dreams burned. Each night, fire danced beneath her eyelids. Not the kind that destroys, the kind that transforms. And then, one night, the water spoke again. The spirit rose from the bank, eyes glowing, hair dripping with stars. You did not drown. The voice was warm, fierce, certain. You rose. The wind carried that sentence across the hills. And the night bowed to the woman the river could not keep. Children gather near fires. Their eyes shine like river stones. Their voices come curious, bold. Is it true she once served the man she judged? The elders nod slow. Her silence held thunder. They speak the story like a prayer, not with fear, but with reverence. They say she was chosen for beauty, but marked by pain. They say she once stirred stew with shaking hands. They say she ran barefoot through the forest and came back carrying storm. They say she touched fire, and it did not burn her. They say she healed others before healing herself. They say she judged not with anger, but with flame. The tale folds into 5 parts. A bride who bled, a girl who ran, a woman who healed, a judge who returned, a legend who ruled. The final line never changes. The day she was beaten, she became the fire. Children sit straighter, eyes wider, hearts louder. They whisper her name into clay pots, into streams, into the hush of night. Her story is told in every marriage now. Before the drums, before the dancing, before the wine touches the lips, the tale must be spoken, because once she sat in the judge's chair, and the world has not forgotten.